I want to give you guys a little bit of a quiz, okay? I'm going to show you, and it's not about the book of Ecclesiastes, just so you know. This isn't like designed to make you stressed. Some of you are like perfectionists. So you just heard the word quiz, you're like, oh, I'm in trouble. No. I'm going to show you a series of items in this backpack. And what I want you to do is you need to try and help me understand, try and guess for yourself, what do these 5 items all have in common, okay? You ready? Here's the first one. Everybody see that? It's a roll of duct tape. Now, let's see, what else do I have in here? Some anti-aging cream, some reversing of the aging process. What do we have? I forget what's next. Oh, yeah. Pack of diapers, just in case. You know what those are for. And let's see. 2 more. A can of Fix-A-Flat, just so you pretty much know what that is too. And a bag of Smokehouse almonds, specifically the Blue Diamond version. Any guesses on what these 5 items might have in common? Duct tape, anti-aging cream, diapers, Fix-A-Flat, and Smokehouse almonds. Yeah? Okay, that's good. Things that are supposed to help you keep your life together, yeah, especially for us parents with the diapers. Yeah, we're getting close. What? Oh, there it is. Yep. The teacher among us learned. So the question is, what do all of these specific items they have in common? And the answer is that they are all temporary solutions to permanent problems. Thank you, Dr. Klinger. Appreciate you very much. These are all temporary solutions to permanent problems, right? Like duct tape is fantastic, but if you get more than like a year out of your duct tape fix, that's amazing. My wife drove a car. It was an 86 Mercury Topaz when we first started dating. It was a 2-door with a 5-speed. It was ugly. Not my wife. The Mercury Topaz was ugly car, and it was the color of duct tape. And that's a good thing because most of it looked like this. Most of the car, this is a pretty good solution if you ask me. This is impressive. Like Susan's bumper was held on with duct tape, like the back, occasionally the back hatch wouldn't shut, and we were in New York State where it's cold, so we would just duct tape that on. But like, this isn't her exact car, don't worry. But this is an example. Like, we use duct tape for all kinds of things, but this is, can we be honest? This is a temporary solution to a permanent problem. Someday, when someone runs another light, like, there's not all that's going to stop the impact is the duct tape itself. So, what about the aging cream, right? Like, I don't use this often, you can probably tell. But, like, we're trying to reverse the effects of aging. What do they call them? The crow's peak, widow peak, whatever those things, and the lines and all that. I don't know what I'm looking for, but apparently, if you use I was watching a commercial the other day. They had like 3 or 4 in a row of different kinds of creams that all do different things. And I'm like, seriously? Like, you need 5 different creams to make your face look okay? Problem is, we're all getting older. And we just got older again. And by the way, you just got older. My dad used to say, Josh, it's miserable getting old, but it beats the alternative. But we're trying to fight the aging process, right? Anybody ever used a can of Fix-A-Flat before? Use this one before? Okay, let me ask a better question. Anybody ever tried to get the remainder of the can of Fix-A-Flat out of the tire after it was over? You ever seen what that looks like? They say you're not supposed to drive over, 50 miles an hour with this thing, no more than 50 miles or whatever it is. Some of you are driving around with 3 or 4 tires full of Fix-A-Flat, right? And you've been doing this for years, but it's going to catch up to us. Diapers, right? Okay, so yes, these are great when our kids are little. But by the time they turn like 4, 5, 6, like if they're still in diapers, there's a problem. The permanent problem is you need to teach your kid how to go to the bathroom. These are great temporary solutions, but not permanent ones. And just so you understand, I've done a lot of confessions, and I'm not asking for you to send me any of these, but this is my go-to snack, right? This is my go-to when I'm like running low on calories and I'm feeling kind of, the ketones building up in my mouth. I'm like, I need some almonds, or I need some protein. But the problem is you eat it and you feel good for about an hour, hour and a half, and then what happens? You get hungry all over again. Hunger is a permanent problem that all of us have as humans. And this is what the writer of Ecclesiastes, he doesn't use duct tape or diapers or aging cream or Fix-A-Flat, right? But what the writer of Ecclesiastes does through the entire book, through the entire chapter of Ecclesiastes 6, he talks about, he's observing, he's paying attention to the ways that you and I as humans, we seek regularly temporary solutions to our permanent problems. Don't we do this often? And then the problem is we wonder why they don't work or they don't work for very long. And this is the issue that the writer of Ecclesiastes is trying to bring to our attention in Ecclesiastes chapter 6, that we as humans, we have this tendency to grab onto things that we think will make us happy, we think will make us fulfilled, we think will make us less stressed out or have less, those line things going on, right? Whatever it is that we think it is that is going to fix, but it's temporary because all of us have a permanent problem, and we know that permanent problem to be death. That there's one unmistakable reality that all of us as humans, that one day we will take our last breath. No matter how many almonds we eat, or how much cream we put in our faces, or how many miles we get out of our Fix-A-Flat, the reality is we all have expiration dates. The heart stops eventually for all of us. And this is what makes Ecclesiastes such a powerful and sometimes for some people a morbid book, because the teacher talks often about the reality of our future for all of us as humans, that we're all going to die. It's inescapable. No matter how long or how hard we try, no matter how many solutions we grab for, we all have an expiration date. And we wonder why those temporary solutions don't fulfill us. We wonder why those temporary solutions don't keep us happy for very long. And this is the point of the writer of Ecclesiastes, specifically chapter 6. Now, let me give us a little bit of a review, right? Remember the two primary burdens. Okay, the overarching problem is that all of us are humans and that we're not eternal, that there's this human finiteness to all of us. But then he said there's two burdens that are associated during the time we are alive, right? According to Ecclesiastes 1:8, that we as mankind were never satisfied. We don't ever get enough almonds. Right? We don't have ever enough Fix-A-Flat in the trunk of our car, right? And that mankind rarely finds meaning. See, the overarching problem is death, but the way that it presents ourselves, the burdens that we face over and over and over, is that we just have this insatiable desire for more money, more time, more friends, more family, more security. And it just doesn't go away. And at the same time, we try desperately to find this, like, why am I here? What is the purpose of life? Why do I exist? And most of us go about our lives unsuccessfully, never understanding our true meaning and true purpose. These are the burdens that the writer of Ecclesiastes is trying to address throughout the entire book. And then remember, there are two primary contexts in Ecclesiastes. I haven't said this I said it the first week, and I'm not sure I've said it since then, but it's really important for us to recognize today that the writer of Ecclesiastes uses terms like under the sun and under heaven. What he means when he says under the sun, he means like this is the problem that all humans have. This is the reality of life on earth. But then when he starts talking about under heaven, he's talking about the way that God has planned it, or the way that God sees and understands and orchestrates the world. So there's two different contexts, and you really have to pay attention to them, because if you mistake the one for the other, you start reading about the meaninglessness of life, and you think that it's talking about heaven, you can get easily depressed and discouraged. But pay attention to these terms. Under the sun and under heaven. Because one, he's describing the reality of human condition, and the other, he's describing the reality of God-like lifestyle, following after God, living as God calls us to live. Under the sun and under heaven. So we're going to go to Ecclesiastes chapter 6. If you have your Bibles with you today, we're going to look at the 7 temporary solutions to our permanent problems as recorded by the writer of Ecclesiastes. I'm going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 6. I'm going to read all 12 verses. And I'm doing this on purpose because there's a weight. I think you've probably noticed that week after week, whatever chapter we're in, I actually read all of it first, because I believe there's just like this gravitas, this weight, there's this significance to reading the entire chapter at once and then going back and kind of spending some time verse by verse. Okay. So Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 1, I'm reading from the NIV version. I have seen another evil under the sun. There's that terminology, right? Pay attention. So he's talking about the reality of the human condition. I've seen another evil under the sun, and it weighs heavily on mankind. God gives some people wealth, possessions, and honor so that they lack nothing their hearts desire, but God does not grant them the ability to enjoy them. And strangers enjoy them instead. This is meaningless, hevel, a grievous evil. Verse 3, a man may have 100 children, that sounds scary, and live many years. Sorry, I love you guys. I just want 3 of you. Like, not more than. A man may have 100 children and live many years, yet no matter how long he lives, if he cannot enjoy his prosperity and does not receive proper burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. Verse 4, it comes without meaning. It departs in darkness, and in darkness its name is shrouded. He's referring to the child who is unborn. Though it never saw the sun or knew anything, it has more rest than does that man. Verse 6. Even if he lives 1,000 years twice over but fails to enjoy his prosperity, do not all go to the same place. Verse 7. Everyone's toil is for their mouth, yet their appetite is never satisfied. What advantage have the wise over fools? What do the poor gain by knowing how to conduct themselves before others? Remember, the writer of Ecclesiastes is talking about the human condition, the problems that all of us face, and the solutions that we try to use to address those problems. Verse 9, better what the eye sees than the roving of the appetite, for this too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Whatever exists has already been named, and whatever humanity has been known. For no one can contend with someone who is stronger. Verse 11, the more the words, the less the meaning, and how does that profit anyone? Finally, verse 12, for who knows what is good for a person in life? During the few and meaningless days they pass through like a shadow. Who can tell them what will happen under the sun after they are gone? Now notice the framing of chapter 6. What will happen, say it with me, under the sun? That's the last verse of chapter 6. And remember the first verse of chapter 6. What will happen under the sun? So what we need to understand is that the writer of Ecclesiastes isn't talking specifically about the way that God ordained things to be, the meaning and worth and value and purpose that God has. It's the things that we as humans try to deal with the problem of death, to deal with the problem of our insatiable appetites, right? These are all the things that we do under the sun to try to solve our permanent problems. So here's the first one. Wealth and fame. We've heard this one over and over and over again in the first. Remember, this is a summary of the first, I think this is a summary of the first 5 books of Ecclesiastes. And one of the things that the writers talk about over and over and over again is that, like, the futility of wealth and fame under the sun. Remember again, verse 1, I have seen another evil under the sun, and it weighs heavily on mankind. Look at verse 2. God gives some people wealth, possessions, and honor, so that they lack nothing that their hearts desire. But God does not grant, okay, so pay attention here. There's 2 parallel statements in this verse. One that God does give, and then one that God does not give. And what God does not give is the key to the entire chapter. God does give some people wealth, possessions, and honor, so that they lack nothing their hearts desire, but God does not grant them the ability to enjoy them, and strangers enjoy them instead. This is meaningless, a grievous evil. So what the writer of Ecclesiastes is trying to help us understand, that whatever fame, wealth, honor, power that we have as humans, it comes from the hand of God. But then notice that second part, what God does not grant them the ability to enjoy them. That is what the writer is saying is meaningless, is hebel, right? We get all these things and we're never satisfied. The newer car, then they bring out a new model, and now we need a different car. We long for a house, and now we need a bigger house, and not just one house, but 2 houses, right? We finally get promoted to that one position, and all of a sudden our eyes are starting to look up at another one. You see, what the writer of Ecclesiastes is trying to help us understand, that all of this wealth and fame and power and influence that we have, that we so desperately seek after over and over and over, is not a whole lot better than a can of Fix-A-Flat in our lives. It's a temporary solution to a permanent problem. That permanent problem being that we are never satisfied. And very rarely do we find true meaning. And notice, and this is the hint, right? Because we're going to get to this in verse 10. And the writer of Ecclesiastes says it even more clearly. But notice what God does not give. Although we get the wealth, some of us get wealth and power and influence, control, security, all those kinds of things, there is this ache, there's this gnawing inside of us for something more. Because God doesn't give us the ability to enjoy it. Now think about this for a minute. For those of us who struggle with the acquisition of more, specifically let's call it wealth, what are you looking for? Are you looking for like stacks of cash that you could put in a box somewhere? Is that what you're looking for? Are you looking for a portfolio that just is bigger and growing? Like, are you just looking for like a whole bunch of gold doubloons to put in your basement, right? Like, is that what you want? No. When we're seeking after wealth, when we're seeking after money, we're not looking for paper, we're looking for meaning. We're looking for worth. We're looking for security. We're looking for value. And let me ask you, how often does that ever really pay off, no matter how much money you get? You see, there's all these promises around wealth, happiness, fulfillment, meaning, but the promises are never fulfilled. And we think it's the wealth's problem. We think it's the money's problem. We think it's that we just don't have the big enough house or the nice enough car or the more important enough job. But really the problem is hidden right here in this verse, that God does not give mankind the ability to enjoy all the wealth, all the power, all the influence. And you're going to see why. So this is a bit of a teaser. So take a nap and come back in 20 minutes and we'll talk about this, okay? Because at the very end, verse 10, God tells us why. Why he doesn't give us the ability, no matter how much money or how many nice cars or how many houses we own or how many antiques we buy. Pick your acquisition moment, why it never fully satisfies you. That's the first one. Second one is kind of a new concept in the book of Ecclesiastes that he talks about in verse 3, a temporary solution to a permanent problem. A man may have 100 children. Okay, let's just stop right there. Let me help you understand something. That our context and our perspective on children compared to ancient Middle Eastern culture is vastly different, right? Vastly different. Because in the ancient Middle Eastern culture, the more children equals the more blessed. The more children, the more power. The more children, the more money. The more children, the more that your life will live on past yourself, right? One of the core promises that God gives to Israel throughout the first 5 books, especially in Deuteronomy, is that if the people of Israel will honor God, will follow God's commandments, he will bless them with children, with offspring, that there will never be any stillbirths, right? So according to the Middle Eastern culture of that day, the more kids you have, the more influence, control, power, wealth, worth, value that you had as a person. That's why you see some of the most powerful kings in all of the Old Testament. They have multiple wives and tons of children. Not because they're actually enjoying their children, no offense to any of you kids, but because it was a status symbol. It was a way of trying to kind of fulfill that ache and that longing and that meaning for purpose and worth and value. It's a little bit different for us in our context today. We don't necessarily equate the number of children with being blessed. In fact, when people hear you get past 3, they're like, are you okay? Like, is everything all right? Like, are you sure you want to do that? Right? Once you get past 3, some of you look at me with my 3 kids, you're like, are you okay? So it's much different in our culture today, but I think there's an equivalent. I think our equivalent has to do sometimes with the time we spend with our family, how close we are to our family, or how many friends we have, how many social media likes we get, how many influencers we have on our platform. Pick your, as Lynn likes to talk about, TikTok or Instagram, right? Like, we have this insatiable desire for more. Now, you don't have to necessarily give birth to all those friends, thank goodness, and then raise them. But we have a similar kind of concept that the more friends we have, the more likes we get, the more we look for value. But the problem is the more it doesn't fill us, and so we need more likes and we need more friends. My kids laugh at me because I very rarely call down my Facebook follower kind of process, and my kids regularly laugh that I have over 2,000 people that follow me on Facebook, technically. I have no idea if they actually do, though, right? And there was a period of time in my life where it mattered to me. Like, I wanted to hit that 2K mark. Nah, I'm at the point where, like, 2 is good. Like, 2 that actually care about me, right? This is the journey that the writer of Ecclesiastes is talking about. No matter how many kids you have, you're never going to be satisfied. No matter how much time you get to spend with those kids, no matter how great they turn out, no matter how much you fix all of your problems in your future generation by doing the things differently that your parents didn't do, it's not going to give you the meaning and worth and value, right? We see it all the time, parents living out their unfulfilled dreams in the lives of their kids, trying to give them something that they didn't have. Can I ask you something? Is it working? Is it working? Is it bringing the meaning and worth and value and purpose that you're looking for? So the second one is family. The third one, this temporary solution to a permanent problem. We're all going to die. We all have this insatiable desire for more. We all struggle to find meaning and purpose and worth and value. Sometimes we look wealth and fame. Sometimes we look family. Sometimes we look at long life, right? Verse 3. If a man have 100 children and live many years, no matter how long he lives, if he cannot enjoy his prosperity and does not receive proper burial, I'll say that a stillborn child is better off than he. Verse 6, it talks about, I think I put it in here, even if he lives 1,000 years, twice over. Okay? Do you understand what the writer of Ecclesiastes is saying? Even if you live double the amount of time that any person has ever walked this earth, right? Methuselah, according to Genesis, lived 986 years. That sounds miserable at this point in my life. Okay, no offense to any of you. But 986 years, he lived almost 1,000 years. Adam was like 934. Don't quote me on these, read your Bible, okay? But it's somewhere in the mid-900s. These individuals lived to be almost 1,000 years old. And he's saying, so you get what the writer of Ecclesiastes is trying to say. Doesn't matter how long you live. Doesn't matter how much cream you put on your face or how many vitamins you take or how many oils you use. Sorry. I'm not trying to beat up on anybody, but the reality is, it doesn't matter how long you live, it will not change the same core, fundamental problem that all of us have. The permanent problem is that we're all going to die, and we're never really satisfied. So that one of the questions, right, one of the primary thoughts behind this in the writer of Ecclesiastes is people thinking, well, if I could just keep doing this longer, maybe I'd find meaning. If I could just prolong my life, I could maybe find enough money or enough purpose or have enough babies or whatever else it is to make me feel good. And the Ecclesiastes writer is saying this is foolishness. What makes you think that after the first 1,000 years, the next 1,000 years is going to get much better? And we live in this day of beauty creams and plastic surgery and cryogenic freezing of your atoms so that they can wake you back up in a couple hundred years and fix your problem. And like, here we are, a couple thousand years later, we're still thinking the same thing. If I just had a few more years, I could find meaning. If I just had a few more years, I could find purpose. But notice, 2 different times, verse 3 and verse 6, no matter how long he lives, if he cannot enjoy his prosperity, but fails to enjoy his prosperity. What's that take us back to? Verse 2, right? Go back to verse 2, where it says, God does not enable him to enjoy them. We think the problem is the number of years. We think the problem is the number of kids. We think the problem is the number in our bank account. But the problem is that we're arguing with God. The problem is we are trying to find temporary solutions for a permanent problem. And God never intended us to enjoy this long life, this prosperity. But there's a reason. He's still awake. Verse 10, there's going to be a reason for why. But this is the theme over and over and over again, that no matter what we do, how much we get, how many kids we have, how many years we live, we still have the same permanent problem. I love this definition for an addiction. An ever-increasing desire for something that has an ever-decreasing ability to satisfy. An addiction is an ever-increasing desire for something that has an ever-decreasing ability to satisfy. We want more money, we want more kids, we want more time, we want more influence, we want whatever it is. We want more freedom, we want more autonomy, we want more power, and like it becomes an addiction. We think it's going to bring us meaning and purpose and worth and value, but the more we get, the less meaning and worth and purpose and value. We all have this addiction to stuff, to the temporary things. You see, because we as humans are fantastically good at seeking temporary solutions to permanent problems. This is the addiction that all of us in some way, shape, or form are burdened with. There's a story. It comes from a Greek mythical creature named Tantalus. Anybody ever heard of Tantalus? Okay. So Tantalus, according to Greek mythology, was a king. A king who was very wealthy, very powerful, very influential, had tons of children, had all kinds of property, but he was never satisfied. And his search for meaning and worth and value and purpose brought him all the way to the point that he sacrificed his own son on an altar as a way of trying to find his purpose and fulfillment. He literally slaughtered his own son. And do you know what the punishment was? The punishment, according to Greek mythology for Tantalus, is that when Tantalus died, that he would spend the rest of his life in a river surrounded by beautiful trees with beautiful fruit, that every time he reached for that fruit, it would pull away. And every time he stooped down to pick up the water, it would wash away. For eternity, he would be tantalized by the feeling of not being able to get that fruit that he wanted or the water that he needed, literally starving to death and starving of thirst for the rest of eternity. That's where we get our term tantalized. See, many of us, we're living the life of Tantalus and we don't even know it. We've got this addiction. We've got this ever-increasing desire for something that has this ever-decreasing ability to satisfy, and we wonder why we're miserable. Take a picture of Tantalus. Put it on your phone. Because for generations, mankind has been struggling with the very same problem that we seek. Temporary solutions to permanent problems in our lives. We're just repeating it over and over. Fourth one, wealth, fame, family, long life, food. I don't like this one at all. Verse 7, everyone's toil is for their mouth, yet their appetite is never satisfied. Okay, so I heard this recently and it struck me, right? What do we do when we wake up in the morning? We grab some food. And then we go to work so that we can get money, so that we can buy food, so that we can go to sleep, so that we can eat, so that we can go to work, so that we can get money, so we can buy food. You see hunger as a permanent problem. I mean, really, that's what we're doing. That's why we have jobs, so we can eat, right? To put food in our mouth. When my kids get frustrated about some of the hours I have to work as a pastor, I'm like, well, do you want to eat? It's not a good answer, and thankfully they don't hit me too hard. But this is our reality. We eat to work, to buy, to eat, to work, to buy, to eat, to work, to buy. And let me ask you, when was the last time that you felt fully satisfied? I mean, we do this at, great meal after Thanksgiving. We're like, oh, I'm not going to eat for days. And then next morning we're like, where is the donuts? I mean, seriously, many of us, 24 hours, we're about to kill ourselves if we don't get to eat. You see, the human condition, the permanent problem that all of us have is that we can't live without fuel. And here's the problem for guys like me, is that I'm going to eat the Coke person, just so you know. If I got problems, best way to fix it is food, just so you understand. It's not, though. That's just my theory. Some of us know what that's like, where we use food as a coping strategy. But what the writer of Ecclesiastes is trying to help us understand is that no matter how great those almonds taste in the moment, a couple hours later, we're still going to be hungry. No matter how amazing that steak was last night, give yourself 24, 36 hours and you're going to be hungry again. And when you get to 4 days, you're really going to be hungry. We have permanent problems that we keep seeking these temporary solutions for. And the writer is just saying we're never satisfied. That human longing inside of us. Wealth, fame, family, long life, food. Here's the next one, verse 7, knowledge, right? We've heard this one over and over and over again. What advantage do the wise have over fools? What do the poor gain by knowing or how to conduct themselves before others, right? The answer is it's meaningless. Right? That even this pursuit of knowledge, right? Consume more content, read more books, philosophy, ethics, acquire more information, but the result is still the same. We live right now in the most information-saturated time in human history. There is accessibility to information on a level that no one in our previous generations could even imagine how much information we have available at our fingertips. So how are we doing at living it? How are we doing it at finding meaning and purpose and worth and value? How are we doing at being satisfied, right? The writer of Ecclesiastes is asking the question, like, in what ways do we turn our pursuit of knowledge and information into a pursuit of meaning and worth and value and take our eyes off of God? Not that you should walk around and illiterate, okay? Sorry, teacher, friends. That's not what we're saying. The writer of Ecclesiastes isn't saying that foolishness is better than wisdom, right? Just at the end of chapter 5, the writer of Ecclesiastes says, right, like, you can pursue those things, but you pursue them with your eyes on God, right? Knowing that God gives you the ability to understand information, knowing that God gives you the ability to acquire knowledge, that God gives you the ability to read, that God gives you access to those books that give you information, that it all comes from God. But this is a temporary solution. Some of the people I've spent significant amounts of time with over the last 25 years who had a ton of knowledge about life and about religion, about God, right? But had very little faith in God himself. The knowledge itself got in the way of their understanding of Jesus, their trust in Jesus. So what the writer of Ecclesiastes is reminding us is that knowledge itself isn't going to fix our permanent problem. Chapter 6, verse 9. The next temporary solution that he talks about is this desire. Better what the eyes see than the roving of the appetite, for this too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind, right? So if wealth and fame aren't working, and family and relationships aren't working, and long life and food and knowledge isn't working, then certainly like making ourselves feel good will, right? Having some sort of transcendental kind of experience where we feel and experience something that'll make us whole, right? That'll fill us. The chasing after feelings. Better what the eyes see than the roving of the appetite. What the writer of Ecclesiastes is saying, like, we have all these insatiable desires in us, and no matter how many times we give into those insatiable desires, they wind up being meaningless. Hebel, smoke, vapor. That, like, it's there for a moment, we feel good for just a minute, and then it goes away, and then we need it all over again. So even desire itself, even giving in to these things we think we want in our lives, it's not going to bring the meaning and worth and value and purpose that we're looking for, because God established it that way, right? Because God doesn't allow us to find ultimate purpose in these less than ultimate things. God doesn't allow us to find permanent happiness in these temporary experiences. Hebel, vapor, breath, smoke, there for a moment, but gone. Look at Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2, okay? So the writer is trying to help us understand that all of these experiences in life, wealth and family and long life and food and knowledge and all these experiences, that they really, at the end of the day, they become meaningless, hard to handle, hard to hold on to like a vapor, right? And remember, this is like the core. This is his thesis statement from 6 weeks ago. Meaningless, hevel, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. Hokal, hevel. Hokal is the Hebrew word. Let me show you. And what he's trying to say, okay? Everything, that being last line of verse 2, everything is meaningless. Everything in Hebrew is hokal. Look how that's written in Hebrew. Now look at meaningless, hevel. Look how it's written. You see how closely? It's just like one pen stroke is the difference between everything and nothing. One breath, one moment is really like the difference between everything and nothing. And just about the time we think we've got it figured out, it's gone again. Because God has designed that these temporary things would not fix our permanent problems. Last one. And this one, I'm speaking specifically to people who are followers of God or are trying to understand who God is. But the writer of Ecclesiastes says that wealth and fame and family and long life and food and knowledge and desire, these are all these temporary solutions to these permanent problems. And then here's one that we often try to employ, at least I do, okay, if we're being honest. We try arguing with God. Look at verse 10. It says, whatever exists has already been named, and what humanity is has been known, for no one can contend with someone who is stronger. Okay? Let's look at this in the New Living Translation. I love the way it's written. Everything has already been decided. It was known long ago what each person would be, so there's no use arguing with God about your destiny. You see, the problem is that when we try to take these temporary things and fix a permanent problem in our lives, what we're really doing is we're arguing with God. We're trying to tell God that his way is not the right way. The solutions to the problems that we have under the sun are not to be found under the sun because God ordained it that way. Do you understand? That no matter how much food or how much money or how much wealth or how much power or how much security or how big your family is, it will never erase the ache in our hearts for more apart from God. And then we do this. We argue with God. Well, God, can't I try this to make me feel good? God, can't you just give me a little bit more of that to make me feel good? Right? God, can't I just have this experience so that it can take away some of this emptiness that I feel? God, can I have that relationship? Right? I think that relationship's going to make me whole. I think that job's going to fill me. We bargain with God. We argue with God against the very rule that he established. I'll put it this way. God has programmed the unsatisfactory nature of all the stuff under the sun so that we would seek him. There's the answer in verse 10. The reason why we have all these things but we can't enjoy them is because God designed nature to be that way. God designed us to experience wealth, to experience happiness in some way, shape, or form, to have relationships, to have knowledge, but for it never to satisfy. Romans chapter 8 puts it this way. For the creation was subjected to frustration. You ever get frustrated when you don't find the things you want or get the things you think you need? We know what that's like. Life in itself is frustration. But here's why. The creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. You see what happens in Genesis when sin entered the world. God placed a curse on mankind. Do you remember this? And the curse was that out of the sweat of your brow would come the produce of the earth, that there would be thorns and thistles and the problems of life that will grow up. And God does that, according to Romans chapter 8, so that we might seek him. So that no matter how much we think we want and how much we think we get, that at the end of the day will never be enough, so that our eyes and our hearts will be fixed on God. And we spend all this time arguing with God. We spend all this time trying to take temporary solutions and use them like duct tape on a giant gaping hole in our roof. We're taking these temporary solutions, and we're trying to solve permanent problems, and God never intended it. You see that curse that God placed on mankind at the fall? It was because of God's grace, because he loves us. If God didn't love us, he'd let a bag of almonds satisfy us. If God didn't love us, he'd let that next job satisfy us. If God didn't love us, he'd let that most important relationship satisfy. But the truth is that the more we take temporary solutions and try to fit them in permanent problems, the more we're proving the reality that God never intended it to be that way. His intention is that we would seek him, that we would reach out for him. Acts 17 says that like all of our lives have been ordained by God so that we might seek him, the good and the bad and the ugly, so that we might fix our eyes on him. Living life backward means giving up temporary solutions for our permanent problems. As we spend this 12-week journey in the book of Ecclesiastes and what it means to live backwards, to live with eternity in mind, to recognize that one day we all will die. One of the ways Ecclesiastes is being so very clear that to live life backward means that we give up these temporary solutions to the permanent problems of our lives. We stop trying to make the wealth make us happy, the relationship make us happy, the job make us happy, the car make us happy. We give up these temporary solutions for our permanent problems. Can I ask you a question? Have you grown weary of arguing with God? Have you grown weary of arguing with God? trying to fit all these temporary solutions into a permanent problem, this ache in your soul. Perhaps you know the frustration that the book of Romans talks about, that frustration where you just never seem to have enough, no matter how much you get. And you're always comparing, and you're always wondering, and you're always thinking about the next thing that you can get, or the last thing that you had that you wish you hadn't lost, right? If that's your journey and you're spending time arguing with God, perhaps it's time for us to surrender, to give up these temporary solutions to these permanent problems. You see, the permanent problem that we all have is death. That one day, God will call time. That one day, we will all see God face to face and give an account for how we lived. No matter how much money or how big your family or how impressive your resume, there's only one answer that will bring the permanent solution to the permanent problem, and that's Jesus. A relationship with Jesus. Not just where you know Jesus in your head, but you trust Jesus in your heart. Not just where you talk about Jesus on Sunday, but you sit with Jesus on Monday. Not just where you sing good songs about Jesus, but those songs take up residence in your heart, and that Jesus is the center of your life. Not that you can't enjoy good things, not that you can't have good jobs and you can't have a nice car, but that we know that those things will never bring us the purpose and worth and value. If you're arguing with God, if you're growing weary of arguing with God about these things, perhaps today's the day that you would choose to surrender. I think there's probably 3 types of people in this room this morning. One is people that have never decided that they're going to trust Jesus for everything. 2, there's people that have decided they're going to trust Jesus for everything, but then they take some stuff back. Ever been there? And 3, some of us are actually living with Jesus at the center. And we're surrendering our wealth and purpose and value and family back to God. But there's this one verse I want to share with you as we close. If you've never decided that Jesus is going to be the center of your life, would today be the day? According to Romans 10:9 and 10, if you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart, not just in your head, but in your heart, that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified. It is with your mouth that you profess faith and are saved. Jesus offers us this relationship where we experience the forgiveness of our sin and a right relationship with God, and we no longer seek these temporary solutions to permanent problems. Can we just quiet our hearts before God this morning? Give yourself just some space, you and God, whatever that looks like. Just ask yourself this question. Perhaps allow God to ask this question. God, in what ways am I seeking temporary solutions for permanent problems in my life? God, would you show us? Would you show us the parts of our lives that are not surrendered to you? God, if there's people in this room today that have never decided to put you first in their lives, that have never chosen to trust you as their only hope of heaven, the only forgiveness of their sins, and the only real meaning and worth and value, may today be the day. Search our hearts, we pray, God. Give us the courage to surrender ourselves to you. Jesus, search our hearts, we pray. Amen.